think it's a 97 Camry or a 98. We did the front struts on it. These things are way past due. This car has a ton of miles on it, well over 200,000. So you can see that's knocked out. And the right side also got a new strut assembly, but it also got a new lower ball joint, as you can see right there. Yeah, it's just an old car with a ton of miles and a ton of things wrong with it, but he, just doing what he has to do to keep it running. So you can see that CV is busted open right there. And not too long ago, he got the can opener treatment. He said he was driving past something and something caught like the quarter panel and it just like curled the metal up like a freaking can opener. That's crazy. So it turns out the stabilizer bar is not seized in place. It actually moves just fine. I know for sure he had broken stabilizer links, and instead of replacing them, he would just like take them off, So I bet that causes some amount of noise while driving with that thing disconnected like that. But maybe one day we'll get new stabilizer links. I'm ready to put the wheels back on this Toyota, and I pick up this wheel and I notice there's a noise. So what the hell is that noise? Start spinning it. There's something inside of this. That's crazy. Yeah, I know what you're gonna say already. I'm looking for excuses to use my welder. And yeah, that's true. So anyway, here goes our cheapo fire pit that we just picked up at Menards a few months ago, and as you can see, it's collapsing. All of the structure here in the middle is just rotted away, and it was actually at a really hard tilt because all of this side collapsed. So I've been using scrap from my parts bin, like the scrap metal, to try to fix it. So here I have a bunch of stabilizer links that I've gone ahead and cut the heads off. Here I have a drum brake spring welded from here to here. Now that's just for decoration. Here I have an entire brake shoe connecting this to this, and here's part of a coil spring connecting this to this. And the rest of the scrap that I have right there in the pile is just way too big a thing. I don't want to start cutting all that big stuff up. So like something like stabilizer links, they're perfect for a job like this because you just chop the heads off, and they're great for reinforcing this thing. So as I get some more used parts that I'm gonna throw out, I'm gonna start adding to this. I know these things are pretty cheap. You figure, why don't you just buy a new one? Well, we haven't had it that long and it's already falling apart. I'm just trying to get a little bit of extra life out of it. But yeah, we know we have to get a new one. And when we do get a new one, I think I'm gonna start reinforcing it right away. Doing a alternator on a 01 Nissan Xterra. Don't you just love when you drop panels and tools fall out? This was inside of there. Made in USA. It's got someone's initials like engraved in it, Armstrong. Don't know how long it's been in there, but got ourselves a new flathead screwdriver. So indeed, this car the battery is not being charged while the engine is running. I didn't diagnose the car. They said it went to a shop, and the shop said it needs a alternator, and they just want me to change the alternator. But I am going to do some quick checks before I just go ahead and throw alternator in it. Despite the alternator looking like it's in a messed up location, they actually give you plenty of access from underneath and even from the wheel well. So honestly, it comes out pretty easy. It says Nissan on it, and looking at the condition of this car, I could tell this car didn't get serviced much. So I'm gonna assume this is the original alternator from Nissan when the car was built back in 2001, I believe. And it's hard to pick up on camera, but it doesn't sound very happy. And I did check for power right at the stud while the engine was running, and we got nothing. So I forgot to mention that I do got the battery charging, because it's pretty much dead from them trying to run the car without the alternator charging. Here we have a Duralast unit. It looks to be the same alternator, so that's good. I'm gonna go ahead and pop this in. Now there's a weird story on this truck. My neighbor just bought this maybe a month ago or so, and immediately after buying it, uh, cold start, it would start up and run just fine. After 20-30 minutes, it would start to hesitate during acceleration, and then stumble and eventually turn off. And when it did turn off, it was either a very extended crank or it just wouldn't start at all. And if you let the car sit for 2-3 hours for the engine to cool off, it would run again, right? So the little dealer that they bought it from told them, oh, it just needs a tune-up, just give it an oil change, give it a tune-up, right? So they brought it to me for a tune-up, and I looked at the car and I said, a tune-up is not gonna fix this. So I looked into it and I came up with my best educated guess. Let's just say shooting the sniper rifle parts cannon at it. I told them I think it needs a crank position sensor. It has all the symptoms, you know, extended crank. It starts up fine when it's cold. Once that sensor gets hot, it starts to kind of stumble, eventually turn off, and then when the sensor's hot, it doesn't want to turn back on until the sensor cools off. So they took it to a shop, and a shop told them, oh, it needs a mass airflow sensor. So the first thing they did is, I mean, it's a good thing they got original parts, but they're not cheap, okay? So they got an OEM mass airflow sensor from Nissan. Didn't fix the problem, right? And then the guy at the shop said, oh, you know what, it needs a new distributor, because I believe the cam position sensor is inside of the distributor. So she came to me saying, hey, now the guy at the shop is saying it also needs a cam position sensor / distributor. And I told her, hey, I don't know, he could change whatever he wants, whatever he's trying to diagnose, but I put my money on the crankshaft position sensor is the culprit here. And looking at it, he did put this on. So it's got a new mass airflow sensor from the dealer, a new distributor, complete housing, everything together from the dealer, because I could see the box inside the car. And they also, because of what I said, she took it back to the guy. She went to the dealer herself and bought the crank position sensor. So it's got an original Nissan one, and he was telling her, because initially when she first brought it up, he couldn't find the crank. And here's the thing about this car, the crank position sensor is in such a messed up place, so bad that I told her I would not do this job. I'm sorry, but you're gonna have to take it somewhere else and let someone else deal with it, because you can't pay me to do this job. I can't see it, I can't put my fingers on it. There's a few YouTube videos on it, but it's still a nightmare, okay? So she bought the sensor, she took it over to him and told him, hey, put this sensor on the car. And he said, oh, your car doesn't come with a crank sensor. You're just one of those cars that doesn't have a crank sensor. So like, what are you talking about? The dealer sold it to me. They even printed out a diagram showing where the sensor is located. So at that point, he just had to eat his words, right? He's wrong, obviously. So he put all the parts on the car. He put the mass airflow sensor from the dealer, the distributor, and a crank position sensor, all the parts from the dealer. And I could tell what he ended up doing to get the job done was, it looks like he pulled off the intake manifold to get a little bit more clearance to get to the backside of the engine, because that's where the sensor is located. And I could tell he was in here because look, new clamps, look at that clamp, it's not even where it belongs. See what I mean? So I know he took off the intake manifold to get that job done. And unfortunately, you know, they just got the job done. They get the car back. From what I hear, I asked them and they said the car was running perfectly after they put the parts on. You know, despite everything getting changed, I think the real problem here, where's that crank position sensor? So anyways, they said it was running good, and one day they just came out, all of a sudden battery lights on, alternator not charging. So here we are. Okay, but it's just really shitty. Welcome to City Walk. Just a really shitty situation for the owner. She just bought this car, and she's already dumping so much money into it. But I fear that I mean, it's a 2001 Xterra. This alternator is not the last thing she's gonna be putting into this car. So I'm all done with the alternator install, and took the battery charger off. You can see our battery says 12.8. So let's go ahead, start up the engine and see if the alternator is charging. Good sign right off the bat is we do not have a battery light. There you go, 14.3 volts. Alternator is working, everything's happy. That's it. I'm gonna finish buttoning everything back up, put on the little shield on the bottom, put the wheel back on, and send it. Got a Honda Pilot here, just got dropped off because the rear brakes are making all kinds of grinding noise. So the owner actually went to AutoZone and he bought new pads, new rotors, and a set of new calipers. Yes, he spent a pretty penny. That's how bad it sounds. So I brought it in, and indeed there is a bad noise. The first thing I notice is the groove on the rim. You see it? There's a groove that's being cut into the rim. It turns out what's going on here is the backing plate, or the dust shield, whatever you want to call it, actually broke off because of corrosion and is rubbing on the rim. Here she goes, all rotted away. Now I looked at the rotor and the brake pads and everything looks great. Okay, the rotor looks good on both sides, the pads look good, so there's no reason to change anything at this moment. Just simply get rid of that noise, and that's it. Put the wheel back on it, and he could take all those parts back and get all his money back. Got this Acura MDX in the garage. Just changing spark plugs, air filter, cabin air filter, and one of the fog lights is also pretty simple stuff. And I pretty much finished everything except for the fog light. That's the only thing I have to do. As you can see, I just finished changing the spark plugs. Job went pretty smooth. This time the owner gets a brake fluid flush. Let's look inside of here. This thing has some electrical gremlins, I guess. The hazard lights are not working. Well, they do work, kind of, but then they kind of don't. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. Same thing with the turn signal. You hit the turn signal and the light will flash like 2 or 3 times, and then it'll go crazy. And all this, even with the hazards, it starts making this really loud buzzing noise coming from inside of here. The owner says it sounds like there's mice inside of there. Alright, so let's have a closer look at this real fast. So here's the hazard button. I'm gonna go ahead and push it. You saw that real quick flash that we had on the... Look at that. That's all we get. Okay, so let's put the key in the ignition. Let's go ahead and push the button again. And the first time I tested it, the lights actually like flashed like 3 times, and then it just it stopped. Okay, so the key is on. Let's try the turn signals. Look at that. And you hear that buzzing noise? Sounds like it's somewhere inside of here. Let's try it to the right. Almost the same thing. It sounds like, you know how when your flashers are blinking, it sounds like a relay going on and off. Well, this buzzing noise sounds like a relay that's not properly disengaging. It's like, you know, vibrating. Yeah. So I never experienced this, but I think I hit the nail right on the head. So I just followed the noise, right? Come down here, there's a fuse panel, and I could hear it clear as day. So I started touching around. You know, if this thing's vibrating, you should be able to feel it. My hand way up here. And you see this box right here, this one, that's a relay. And if I put my hand on it, I could, first of all, if I move it, I could make it sound different and actually stop, as you just heard. But I could definitely feel it vibrating. I think we just have a bad relay. Alright, so I got this relay off. What I'm assuming is just a fancy relay. You can see where it's got little speaker holes where the clicking noise comes out of. I'm suspecting this is bad, but what I want to do is open it up right here, pry the case off, and let's see if we could see something. Honestly, I don't see anything wrong. I'm no expert, I'm far from it as far as electronics, but I looked over and I don't see anything that just jumps out at me. And I'm trying to use my mirror right here to look at the pins, and kind of see them. Well, you could kind of see them, but I could see them pretty good. And I don't see any corrosion on that side. Yeah, that was just a final check I wanted to do. Make sure there's no green crusties up there. But yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and shoot the parts cannon at it and just try a new relay. Quick update, the owner dropped off the new turn signal relay. Here goes the part number for that. And I've already There's too much glare right here. But I've already gone ahead and installed it, and the first test is hitting the hazards. And what do you know, they work. So let's try the turn signals. Alright. Yay, turn signals work. That's what it was. It was a bad relay. So yeah, again, that's part number for it. Quick side note, it's the first time I've ever seen anyone buy a light bulb from the dealer. But she was at the dealer buying that relay, so it only made sense to pick it up, you know, while she was there. So I don't blame her. This Trailblazer in the garage, look how bad this wheel bearing is. Pretty bad. Everything's coming apart super easy. I think this is the first time I ever took apart a wheel bearing and it literally just fell out. Look at this. As soon as the last bolt came out, it just fell. Pretty good. The car's so eager to get fixed that it's just coming apart by itself. Since we are also doing the lower ball joint, it made no sense to pop in new wheel bearing right now. So obviously just take everything off, right? It just makes the job way easier. So as you can see, it's off. Now we're not going to mess with the upper ball joint because I just replaced that not too long ago, and this upper control arm. So all of that is good. It's simply just the lower half that we're fixing. Yeah, it's pretty worn out and the boot is torn open, and the snap ring just literally snapped in half. That's crazy. I've never seen that before. Well, sometimes, you know, I don't even know my own strength. And FYI, I have been eating my Raisin Bran, so that might be it right there. As you can see, I got the new ball joint installed, and we got some fancy ball joints here. Well, I suppose they are, I don't know, but they look cool. So the one that was in there, that bad boy was in there pretty tight. I used my regular mid-torque gun, and that thing was not budging. The gun was struggling to try to press it out, so I grabbed the big gun, and just a few hits of that gun and that ball joint popped right out. So just another example of why having one gun doesn't always cut it, even though this one does like 95% of the work on a daily basis. So unfortunately, because of how bad the wheel bearing was, it let the rotor sit at a weird angle, and it was causing the rotor to rub on the inside of the brake caliper. You could see how the metal is all distorted, and you could also see it on the face of the rotor right here. So it won't be too long before this car needs front brakes again, which is really unfortunate because these brakes were not that old. So I'm just about done with this side. I'm just gonna go ahead and torque down the axle nut to the correct torque specs. The other side is just getting a upper and lower ball joint, no wheel bearing. Here's the upper ball joint on the passenger side. It looks like it's also going to need a upper control arm, but we don't have that today, so it's not going to get done. But the upper ball joint is actually part of the knuckle. It's not part of the upper control arm. So that's why you have to buy both, because they don't come together like a regular upper control arm would that has a ball joint built into it. But yeah, and the lower ball joint on this one is just as bad. But you can see how this is not safe at all. That could just pop out at any moment while you're driving. Alright, so unfortunately this side also needs a wheel bearing, which we're not doing right now, of course. We don't have one, but yeah, it's pretty bad. Man, this truck is all tore up. Oh, and the outer tie rods are destroyed. Ton of play in this ball joint. It needs everything, you know what I mean? The truck's been sitting for a few days underneath the tree, so it's completely filled with spiders, and spiders keep coming out of this freaking rotor. I think I've killed about 5 of them already, and every time I'm doing something else, another one just runs out. You just saw that one right there. Freaking creepy, okay? Just my luck. Alright, so that's it. Everything is buttoned up, torqued down, and good to go. Did a oil change on a Nissan Sentra. The engine did not sound too happy when it got here. The owner said she's owned the car for about 2 years and has never done a oil change on it. And when I drained the oil out of it, I want to say less than a quart of oil came out, maybe like half a quart. This is the oil filter that was on here. Now I drilled a hole in it so it could drain out, but that's not what we're looking at. We're looking at, look at the rust, how the paint is just flaking off because the whole bottom side of this filter is just rusty. Like if you just grab a screwdriver, it'll like collapse because this metal is just, I could feel it flexing just by pushing on it with my finger. It's crazy. Needless to say, the engine sounded much better with full 5 quarts of oil in it.